All right, everybody ready? All right, at this time we'll call the February 21st, 2022 Planning Board meeting to order. At this time we'll raise and do the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we'll have a slight change of agenda a little bit before we get started. Eva, I'll ask that you swear Catherine Townsend in as the official planning board member.
Catherine, if you repeat after me. Do I need to stand up? Or no? I'm good. Do I need to stand up?
Nope.
No,
Just go ahead and
raise your. Oh, sorry.
I, Catherine Townsend,
I, Catherine Townsend,
do solemnly swear
that
that I will support and maintain the Constitution and laws of the United States
I will support and maintain the Constitution and the laws of the United States
and the Constitution and laws of North Carolina,
and the Constitution and laws of North Carolina,
not inconsistent therewith,
and
that I will faithfully discharge the duties of my office as a member of the Town of Fuquay-Varina Planning Board.
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of my office as a member of the Town of Fuquay Planning Board.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you.
Welcome to the planning board.
Thank you.
Well, with that being sworn in and Jim being out, I guess we have quorum, so we can continue on to our agenda. The next agenda item is the approval of the minutes from the January 11th, 2022 planning board meeting. The purpose of this agenda item is to consider those approval, and has everybody had a chance to review those meeting minutes? And if so, any changes, corrections, or a motion?
Move they be approved as written.
Got a motion? Second. And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on to item 3A, which has been withdrawn, so I don't think we have to do anything with that. So now we move on to item 3B, zoning map amendment and land use plan amendment, Wakefield Development, 8537 Lake Wheeler Road, portion of PIN 0689455964, REZ 2021-10. And I don't believe we have to, let's open up with a blanket statement about public hearings. Public hearings are time for petitioners to present requests and for the public to state their concerns, voice their opinions in favor or in opposition of these requests. At this time, I'll ask Planning Director to review the meeting protocol for the public participation.
Thank you. Tonight's meeting is both in-person and virtual. Tonight's meeting contains a scheduled public hearing. Due to the hybrid nature of the meeting, the public will be invited to comment both in person and virtually via the Zoom virtual meeting platform. When it is the appropriate time, the chair will first call on those wishing to address the planning board that are attending in person, followed by those wishing to address the planning board via the Zoom platform. All attendees that have appeared in person to address the planning board should provide your name and address on the registration log at the podium during the public hearing you intend to speak on. All attendees that have joined the meeting virtually have joined muted. If those joining virtually wish to address the planning board related to a scheduled public hearing, they will need to notify the town host that they wish to speak. For the public's benefit that may be joining the meeting via the Zoom platform, please press the raise hand button in the Zoom app to notify the town host you wish to address the board. Please press the *9 to raise your hand if you're joining by telephone. After an individual has raised their hand, they will enter a queue. When the scheduled public hearing begins, the chair will ask the town host to recognize individuals that have notified the town host they wish to speak by calling out their name or the last 4 digits of their telephone number. Individuals will be unmuted one at a time and invited to address the planning board. We ask all those wishing to address the planning board to begin their comments by clearly stating their name and address for the public record. This concludes the protocol for tonight's meeting.
Thank you. Since I screwed up the order of that, we'll go back to public hearing item number 3B and go back and correct me if I'm wrong, James, but we opened the public hearing, so at this point we're just continuing the public hearing. Staff doesn't have to actually go back and reread everything they've done and rehash all that. But at this time, I'll ask if the petitioner or if anybody wants to speak in favor has anything new to add to this case since last time, and then I'll go back and we'll get staff to give us an update maybe on some things that have happened since last meeting and go that route. So.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. My name is John Adcock of the Adcock Law Firm, located at 202 East Academy Street. I represent Wakefield Development, the petitioner on this rezoning application. We appeared before you last month. In January, this item was tabled. what I believe to be one of the reasons for the table was allow my client to present their plan to the land use consultant that is preparing the updated land use plan. That did occur, but we've not received any feedback. We didn't receive any feedback based on what I've been relayed to me. There was no feedback given during the meeting, and we haven't received any, to my knowledge, since then. So again, I emphasize, I thought the entire point of that process playing out was to allow the consultant to give us some feedback on how this fits with the land use plan that's being updated. But we've not had any information regarding that. I do want to there are two basic points the town has identified in their staff report to recommend denying this rezoning. One is that the land use plan is being updated, and that because this petition includes a request for an amendment to the land use plan, they could not recommend that a zoning request would be approved if there's a land use amendment tied to that. Well, that's what we have here. I look back over the past year of this board's agenda, and going back to January of 2021, there were 15 rezonings before this board from January 2021 until tonight. Of those 15, 7 included land use plan amendments. So I want to make the point that it's not uncommon for a land use plan amendment to accompany a zoning request, a change in zoning. So of those 15, as I said, 7 included a land use plan amendment, and of those 7, only 1 was recommended for denial, which is this case. And I do want to point out that in December of this year, based on the information that's been provided to me, after the land use consultant started the process of updating the land use plan, this board did hear a zoning case that had a land use plan amendment. It was the Dan Ryan project, which is at the end of Academy Street. Very similar circumstances. It was in December, well after the land use consultant, at least what's been relayed to me, had initiated the work that he's doing, he or she or the company that he has is doing. And in that situation, the staff did recommend that the amendment to the land use plan be approved, along with the rezoning, and that's what occurred. I'm sure there's some distinctions, between properties, but in the day, the land use classification was the same land use classification that we're trying to move away from. And the stated reason in the staff's report for recommending approval of that land use plan amendment, I want to read it so that I make sure I don't misquote what the staff said in the report. Basically said it would allow for the site to be developed more consistently and appropriately as it relates to the proposed use and surrounding area. Now, I know some of Ms. Townsend's first time on the board, or maybe second time on the board. Some of you weren't here for that. I understand that. But this is a purely residential project that's going to be constructed at the end of Academy Street, to my knowledge, of townhomes. And so, it's just outside the Judd Parkway loop, which, based on my recollection of the land use plan, seeks to emphasize density in and around the Judd Parkway loop. So in that situation, with the land use plan being updated, the staff recommended approval of the land use plan amendment, which in our case, their first point of their first basis for recommending denial is that the land use plan is being updated. The second point that the staff is using to recommend denial of this application is this commercial component. We talked about that at the last meeting. This is a 28, 30-acre parcel of real estate. You can see on the maps that are being published at the moment. You see that there's a large swath of Connect 540 going through this property. That right-of-way has been deeded over to Department of Transportation for 540 to be completed. You'll see that with 540 being constructed through this property has lost over 700 lineal feet of road frontage. And, it's basic real estate that, when you have commercial, you want visibility. And so we have a site that also has some environmental constraints that also is very limited because of the construction of 540. The other thing that I want to point out, and the staff, I believe, has acknowledged this. I don't want to put words in their mouths, but I believe this is the case, that in 2017, when the land use plan was adopted and this MUN land use designation was placed on this property, there was a belief that there may be an interchange at 540 and Lake Wheeler Road. But we know that's not the case now. There is no interchange there. So again, it would appear that the basis for designating this as MUN on the land use plan had something to do with the fact that there was a possibility of an interchange at 540 in Lake Wheeler, and that did not occur. There's also no connectivity to adjoining parcels. I mean, you'll see that, you've got an existing subdivision to the northeast that has no, that has a cul-de-sac that's not going to be stubbed into this property. It's just, this is at the northern end of the jurisdiction of Fuquay-Varina. And within less than a mile from here, you have hundreds of thousands of square feet of retail and non-residential uses. Costco, there's Chick-fil-A being built in front of Costco with something else. You've got the Harris Teeter strip mall. That whole section of 401 and 1010 intersection is a retail commercial focal point. And as I would suggest, as it should be, because it's an intersection of two major highways. I also have tonight with me, I want to read into the record, I want to enter in the record. I have two letters with me tonight. One is from NIA Tri-Properties dated February 4th, addressed to Matthew Danielson with Wakefield Development. It is from Rob Griffin, the Associate Director of Development and Land. The letter states that, Matthew, thank you for sharing your plans for the Banks Farm development. After reviewing the plan, the surrounding area, and traffic, I agree with your assessment that Banks site doesn't support commercial uses. The current traffic counts are too low to justify commercial development. Taking into account future traffic growth and the addition of new homes in the area, the idea of introducing commercial mid-block doesn't follow traditional commercial growth logic. If the current intersections along Lake Wheeler aren't being pursued for commercial growth. Commercial development in an area such as this would typically be led by retail uses, and those uses are going to first look to intersections to capture traffic from both directions. None of the Lake Wheeler intersections that I'm aware of south of Trine Road have been developed or pursued for development as commercial. Given this overall lack of market acknowledgement of Lake Wheeler as a commercial corridor, attempting to include commercial mid-block seems to miss the mark for highest and best use of the property. Couple this with the relatively close proximity to existing commercial at Highway 401 and 1010, there's plenty of commercial development opportunity within easy reach to serve the residential development of the Lake Wheeler Road corridor. I also have a letter from Scott Corbin, team, commercial real estate broker, from Michael Clifton, addressed to Matthew Danielson of Wakefield Development, dated February 4th, 2022. Dear Mr. Danielson, thank you for the opportunity to review the potential commercial component of Banks Farm off Lake Wheeler Road, Fuquay-Varina. As you know, I have been a commercial broker in Raleigh since 2006. I've reached out to several of our clients and specifically asked them about your community. All of them declined this site, saying they did not believe it would be a viable location. I do not believe commercial is the best and highest use for this property for two specific reasons. You need higher density for mixed-use developments to be successful. 100 to 115 residential units in Banks Farm is not enough to sustain a standalone business. Commercial in this area should be located at the major intersections such as 1010 Road and Fayetteville Road near the future 540 and Fayetteville Road interchange. That's from Michael Clifton. I'll provide those for the record in a moment. Wakefield Development, they do commercial development. They do commercial development. And if they saw the market to put the commercial on this site, they would most definitely be seeking to pursue that. But they've done the research. They've done the research on this property. And I'm not discounting what the research they've done. They have a whole jurisdiction to look after, and they do a great job of it. But at the end of the day, Wakefield has specifically zeroed on this property when they got under contract, before contract, and even after contract, and they have determined it is not the highest and best use of the property, and it will not be successful. So that is, where we are with this commercial situation. It's not a property that sets up well for commercial. If there had been an interchange with 540, it'd be a different story, but that did not occur. I also want to talk a little bit about the property owners. Again, I made reference to this in last month's meeting, but this property was involuntarily taken into the ETJ by the town of Fuquay-Varina. And now with that being the case, and they were, given a set of regulations to follow, a land use plan to follow, that's subject to being amended. Now they're in a situation where we don't have one of the contentions by the town is we got to wait for the land use plan to be updated. There's been no definitive time frame for that to occur. There's been, to my knowledge, there's been no request for public involvement in the land use plan update, which is a critical part of comprehensive land use planning, is input from the citizens and property owners of the jurisdiction. I'm not suggesting they're not going to do that at some point, but to my knowledge, where we stand tonight, there's been no invitation for anyone to be involved with this other than a land use consultant and the staff. And we thought we were getting invited to present our plan so we could have comments back from the land use consultant and the town to see, hey, if whatever this land use consultant is working on is what we're proposing here, something that might work within what they may be proposing. We don't know because we didn't get any feedback on that. And I thought the specific direction of the board was to direct the staff to get back with us with that feedback, and we've not had that. There's a process here. I mean, nobody's questioning the need for the town of Fuquay-Varina to update its land use plan. That's a critical part of comprehensive land use planning. So, you've got the policy that you're trying to seek to revise your land use plan, which I personally support completely. But there's a process here as well, and it's just wrong. What has happened here is just dead wrong. On December 6, 2021, Wakefield Development was told, after months and months and months of dealing with the staff, submitting, resubmitting, going back and forth, they were told on December 6th the plan will get a favorable recommendation from the staff. Without any change of conditions, without much of any justification, on December the 10th, the staff contacted my clients and said, we can't do that now, we're going to recommend denial. Again, the process, after going through all these months and having a rule book to play by, it was just thrown up in the air completely. And we've seen the inconsistency with the Dan Ryan project, where it's very similar facts, circumstance, where they had a land use amendment that was part of the rezoning, that was within the time frame that this land use plan is being updated, and yet that one moved forward without, I know there was pushback back and forth, just like there are always in these transactions. But at the end of the day, that project was recommended for approval. And again, I go back to a few of the points I made since we're not going through the whole the presentation from the staff tonight. I just want to make a few more comments about the project itself. We're talking about a project that has just more than 3 units per acre density. I mean, it's just a little more than 3 units per acre. Immediately adjacent to 540 and with a blue line stream going directly through the property. It's a tough site for them to develop with a lot of limitations. There's plenty of civic space. We've demonstrated previously the amount of open space that has been that's being offered as a part of this project, which exceeds what's being required. This is a good project, and commercial is not a use for this property that would have any success at this time. And I don't believe that in the future there would be any success with commercial being on this site either. So we respect the staff's position. We disagree with it. We think the process has been wrong, and we believe that whatever occurred between December 6th and December 10th, we'd like to know what that was. So perhaps we could address that, but that has not been described to me what took place. But at some point, after months and months of going back and forth, the staff agreed that commercial was not appropriate for this property, and then that changed. I'll be glad to address any questions, if there are any.
Anybody have any questions for John? I think you're good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I think before we let anybody else get up there and speak, I think it's fair to let staff kind of go through and let's address a couple of these topics. One being, I think it's important to understand the distinct differences between the Dan Ryan project and this one. I can understand the correlation, but I think there's some pretty distinct differences there that I think we need to...
There were 2 major differences with that one. One was that was also delineated to be a form-based development. There were some inconsistencies with the existing land use plan. That mixed-use neighborhood development actually went over the existing developments of Adland Place, the town's county library, and the new Kalik Senior Center that are all being developed as commercial and residential properties. So that area, the Adland Place was actually already an approved plan when the land use plan was adopted, and it was definitely not mixed use. So that mixed use district already is incorrect and will be corrected with this. The other big point on that one, I think is even more critical, is that the majority of that property was zoned RHD, residential high density. They could have developed townhomes by right on the majority of the property. There were just 2 small parcels that they could have rezoned in isolation, but that would have left it kind of a weird donut hole in our land use plan. So we asked them to rezone the whole property to correct the whole thing, which did include a land use plan amendment. But with that, they were able to do townhomes on the entire property with the added conditions that we like to see. So instead of just letting them do townhomes by right, that they could have built anything they wanted, by incorporating the land use plan amendment and the rezoning, we were able to get some really high quality conditions and ensure that there were no homes fronting onto Beavis Marks and some other elements that we thought were critical to high quality development in that area.
I think they also reduced the density in that, didn't they, from what they could have done by east by right as well?
I
right?
believe they did, yeah.
I think they reduced it, okay. But I do think, to the point, I mean, like we are at a situation here on this board with this particular project being kind of the first one coming through as we're going through a land use plan amendment, and we got to figure out how it is we're setting the precedent moving forward here, and how every other case that comes through here, how we look at it, because showing favoritism is not really something that I think staff, management, or this board really wants to do. So I think that's fair of a question for us to address, is to how are we looking at these things moving forward as projects that are not really for the land use, that are not against or that are requiring a land use amendment as we're progressing with this change, and then where are we at with this change?
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's worth addressing too.
Yeah, so, excuse me, we feel, and not feel, but we know it is in the best interest of the public, staff and the public and the development community, to treat all projects equally. There have been several projects that during this transitional time, as I had mentioned before, and we discussed at great length at the January planning board meeting, that we are a month or so away from getting updates on our land use plan. And we feel that it is equitable and judicious to treat all projects the same and not allow land use plan amendments to occur, because we don't want anything to move forward that could potentially negatively or in some form impact what updates are ultimately will be changed on the land use plan. So to Mr. Adcock, when he had made the point of he wanted to know what happened that time in December, was this project, in addition to several projects that are located in different nodes throughout the community, we're not doing a complete retool of our land use plan. Our land use plan that was adopted in 2017 has been serving us well, and but we've realized, given the robust growth and the type of projects that are coming in, we need to retool in certain areas. And so what we decided was, as a way to be fair and equitable for all projects coming in, we've asked developers to pump the brakes and hold up on rezoning or land use plan amendments until we have those updates from our land use plan consultant. So anyone that's come in over the last several months, and even those projects that we were working with before December, we've asked them to all hold on, give us a little bit of time, and we believe the public, and they would be better served once these updates were included.
Sure. So I guess the remaining item, when it comes to that and talking to the land use plan, it sounds like they were able to present something to the land use plan consultant, and we still got this issue with residential versus non-residential, and I guess maybe some initial feedback is that staff and management and the land use plan consultant still feel like there's a need for a non-residential component on this site. Is that kind of where we're landing, or is it just more of a, you don't know yet, so we're holding to what the land use plan says at the moment?
Yeah, thank you. As we made it very clear in our recommendation for denial, we gave 2 reasons that Mr. Adcock had mentioned. One was we are denying this based on we're waiting for the land use plan update, which we would do for any project that was wishing to move forward during this time. The other one is, yes, according to the land use plan, and then, of course, over the last month or so, since we've talked to the land use plan consultant and the petitioner has presented their request or their project to the land use plan consultant, looking at it, and one element that the petitioner had mentioned was Wakefield Development as far as what type of commercial should be built there today, or whether or not commercial could be built there today. We're not talking about Costco. We're not talking about big box retail. We're talking about neighborhood, small-scale commercial, something that has a multimodal component to it, to where people, the residents directly on that property, nearby, could eventually walk to some type of neighborhood commercial. We're talking about a daycare. We're talking about professional offices. We're not talking about a large, 125,000 square foot big box retail that's going to require 300 parking spaces. It's not what we're talking about. So today, as the land use stands, which it says mixed use neighborhood, staff believes and affirms that some type of non-residential component should be integrated into this site. If the waiting on the land use plan update, and again, for those other projects that have since come to us, we've explained the same scenario to them as well.
Gotcha. Does anybody on the board have any questions for staff right now? We'll come back to them in just a second, but.
I do want to make one more point, if that's, as far as public input, again, we're not completely redoing our land use plan. We're focusing on several areas throughout town, but believes a comprehensive approach to working with members of the development community as far as pumping the brakes, we think is the most judicious. So the waiting on the land use plan, of course, we believe is in our best interest, and I totally apologize. Public input. Once we have the information from our land use plan consultant, which we expect to get over the next several weeks, we plan on, as far as our public input, putting this on social media as far as giving the highlights of what elements of this plan are being updated. So not only members of the development community can see it, but also members of the public, the residents of Fuquay-Varina can see that. We plan on putting it on Let's Talk Fuquay, our online portal that allows members of the public to see this. And again, of course, bringing the updates before it goes to the town board for review to the planning board, and being available to answer any questions during this time, and then ultimately presenting it to the town board for their approval as well. So we believe that we've taken a diligent approach to this, and we plan on, as soon as the updates are ready, we plan on presenting them so everybody has a fair share of looking at them and then commenting on them.
So how many months are we talking out?
Oh, so today's February 21st. We're by the middle of March would be the absolute late. I'm estimating the middle of March before we could give a draft update, and when this information would be available for the entire public to comment on.
And then it goes to the public, and then it goes to the town board for a vote.
Correct.
So all of that accumulated, what are we talking about?
We're thinking draft in middle March, and we're thinking probably the second meeting in April for town board adoption.
Will that allow enough time for any changes if significant input comes back in from the public?
Yes. Yeah. Allowing probably about a month's worth of time for that information that does come back in from the public. So our target goal is draft in middle March, adoption in April.
So is there any kind of like town hall type meeting that you're planning to do with the public for them to look at it, or is it basically going to be going through social media and through those channels, then it's going to come to planning board in some sort of a public fashion, and then to town board in a public fashion, or is there going to be anything in between, like meetings? A lot of times I think we did the one in 2017. I think we did like a town hall kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Are you guys planning to do any of that with this one? Because it's an amendment, maybe it's not necessary, maybe it is. Just trying to add transparency to the process, I think is fair to all the developers, to everybody, to understand how we're proceeding with this.
Yeah, instead of having a big public forum, which we can do, but we just believe, for the members of the development community that have specific questions, plan on meeting with them. And then, of course, addressing whatever specific comments. But, again, a lot of it has to do with the feedback that we get back from the public. The development community and then the residents of Fuquay-Varina as well could also determine to what extent we need to end up having more public outreach. But making sure that any updates are available for comment and review on social media, on our town website, that diligently goes through it is the intent.
So that brings up a kind of an interesting point. When developers of specific projects come in and get different feedback back, it sounds like that they've brought this in, they haven't gotten any feedback yet. So is there a mechanism where, is it further down the line they can come back and do this again?
Yep.
And is that kind of where you guys are wanting to lead them down that path? Because it sounds like they didn't really get any feedback in this last month, and we weren't sure if we were going to or not. I mean, but how does somebody like them that wants to do something at this point before the land use plan has come into change get that one-on-one feedback on a particular piece if we're only retooling certain parts?
Yeah, sure. As soon as the comprehensive updates are available to staff, we would plan on meeting with all the developers that we had been working with, and of course the petitioner, to share those updates, and then work with the petitioner and then any other developer and/or project, to figure out how their project could fit into where our land use plan updates fall. So
it sounds like right now they're just not getting any feedback because you guys really haven't gotten the feedback, and you don't want to prematurely let something out.
that is correct.
Understood.
I think it's also irresponsible the town board is the ultimate decider on this. So
Sure.
if the consultant gives feedback and it's not something the town board's, it's just premature.
Sure. Okay. Anybody else for staff?
I guess I just have a question. So when they bought this property and it was included in the ETJ, when was it communicated to them that it's always been mixed use? When was it communicated to them that they couldn't change it and this revision to the land use plan was going to happen? Like, have they always known since they purchased the property that it was mixed use?
As long as it's been in the ETJ, it has always been the same.
Okay.
The land use designation has not changed.
And they've always been presumably wanting to change it to just residential only?
So there was a pre-development meeting held on this, and we clearly communicated then that we had never walked away from a form-based zoning district before, and that would be something that we would have to look into and consider, and it'd have to be justified.
Okay.
So that was communicated in the beginning.
Okay.
Okay. Scott, you got anybody online that has any hands raised?
No, sir.
Does anybody else wish to speak in favor or opposition? Come on up and just give me a opposition or in favor. That way we know.
Sure.
For the record.
I'm Matthew Danielson. I'm with Wakefield Development. I'm in favor. And I would like to actually clarify a few things. First of all...
And just grab your address.
Sure.
The address for...
3100 Smoke Tree Court, Suite 210, Raleigh.
Got it.
For a few clarifications. First, planning staff is in a very difficult position. We had originally did our pre-application meeting, April, I think it was, roughly. Originally, we submitted with a commercial component. However, our research showed that commercial does not work in this area. Quick side note, we're working with staff on a development 1.2 miles from here, that will have mixed use, same zoning, 6 to 8 acres of commercial. So we do commercial. This is not a commercial spot. However, April, May, June, July, August, we were working with staff, and we had staff support. Not only did we have staff support, but in your outline here, you'll see that we did 17 specific items above and beyond what was required in the UDO. Glad to do it. Very specific things that, in fact, if staff didn't agree with this, and there was no reason for us to even negotiate any of this, we had staff support a week before our December planning meeting. That's when we learned that there was a land consultant. We didn't know that ahead of time. So from our perspective, at the last minute, this got pulled from us, which seems a little unfair, to us at least. A couple of points, just if you could see your screen here. Yes, this property is zoned for a commercial component. I believe the assistant manager, sorry, don't know your name.
Jim Seymour.
Jim, thank you, Jim, had mentioned that you want this to be a walkable area. Well, you're not going to have anyone walk across a 4-lane Lake Wheeler. That's not going to happen. You're really not going to have anyone from the north of us walk to this site. And, of course, to the south of the site is 540. So only walkable would be the 120 units within this community. We are maxed out at 120. We can't do 121 because there's only one access. If you look at page of your report here, page 5, about halfway down, and I'll read it for you. Typical densities in a mixed density residential neighborhood range between 4 to 8 dwellings per unit. We're already almost 25% below the minimum requirements. Now, if you have us do a commercial component, we're going to be down to about 100 or so units, which puts us right around 2.81%. We're only at 70% of the threshold at the bare minimum. So, no, this is not a viable commercial component. Don't take my word for it. Take the word of commercial brokers who we've reached out to and said, what can we put here? I could show you my research, but you won't believe it. So take the word from local brokers who've been in this market for 15 plus years. This does not work. And that's the question really that we just have to ask is, do you think this is a viable commercial component? And insofar as letting people, stakeholders, have their say in it, the property owners that we are purchasing this from don't like the idea of commercial. We had 2 neighborhood meetings, had no support, no excitement for commercial. No one in the area thinks that this is a commercial place. The question is, what do you think? Do you think that this place, this property, is viable for commercial? Thank you.
Thanks.
And I'm happy to answer any questions.
I think at this time we're going to close the public hearing for any more comments. And Scott, unless you see anybody their hand raised, all right, we're going to close that. Then we can take it back to staff and kind of wrap this thing up and go through some of these points. I think we really have kind of 2 issues we're looking at. One, how are we proceeding with this as a precedence? It does stink that you feel like you have the rug pulled up underneath you. I can understand that, but I can also understand the town not approving a project just because it sucks. Quite frankly, we got to set those precedences now, and I think that's one issue we have to look at. And then the other issue is, do we believe this should be residential or non-residential? Does it have a commercial component? And I think we can make those discussions, but it sounds like staff has some comments for us, some feedback.
I just want to clarify. I was looking at my notes. I apologize. So as far as the timing of this, and again, we mentioned it'll be on Let's Talk Fuquay. We'll be presenting this to the planning board, the updates as an item for discussion. But as far as we plan on having the draft available in March, before the planning board in April, and then ultimately the town board in May for adoption. And that's assuming that there are no major hiccups. So I just wanted to correct that.
Thank you. So at least now we have some sort of a timeline
Yes.
that we can start to game plan from.
Yes.
And I think that is pretty helpful in our decision making here as a board. So we'll kind of go around and give everybody's at. I'll tell you where I'm at. I think it's a pretty good plan, honestly. I mean, I like the plan, but I do also understand the precedence of how we have to move forward with these. This will not be the last zoning case that comes in with a land use plan amendment between now and May. So we kind of have to. This one's going to set how we move forward with everybody else. I don't see the correlation between this one and the Dan Ryan one, just because the Dan Ryan one was already kind of a use by right, and I feel like we got a betterment out of that, which is what we should be doing with all of our rezoning projects, is getting something better for the town, somehow, some way. And I feel like we did get a betterment there. But it's up to the board on how we feel on this, and I'll take it to the board for any comments or dialogue or suggestions or motions.
Well, when I look at this property and I think about what are some ideas to make a property successful when it has mixed use components, and I really look at connectivity all around. If you've got, in my opinion, if you have a lone parcel that doesn't have a lot of connectivity, and you're really looking at offering that live, work, play ideal that we look for with mixed use, this property doesn't support that. You've got the barrier with 540 around NCDOT, owns a lot of the property surrounding that. It probably won't be developed. It'll be preserved for, access for DOT or whatnot. We're not going to have connectivity from the property to the north and the east for this. So I do have some concerns about, offering that connectivity for successful commercial business. It's really going to be serving this community, which I'm 100% I love the idea of mixed use, being able to, do that live, work, play in your community. You don't have to get in your car, get out and go. You can do it all in one area. But I just don't see this property being able to serve and offer connectivity for successful mixed use.
I would agree with you.
As much as I appreciate town staff, as a real estate broker, I do not see commercial there. It's just that plain and simple. Even small businesses have to make money too. So I don't see any commercial there.
Yeah, I think in an ideal situation, what we would want is for this thing to get delayed a little bit, look at the land use plan and kind of target that out. But unfortunately, we don't really have that luxury if we're going to do that, because the next person and how we proceed here is important. So
that unknown of 540 back when this land use plan was originally adopted, really, those unknowns, and you didn't know, but you were, you had to plan for what you thought could happen in the future and then work with the changes later. And I think that's the situation we're dealing with here, is the potential of interchange, which would have provided the connectivity, and it would have made this whole area successful with commercial. Now that it's a flyover, I think that does change, which is a perfect time. Now that we know what's going to happen in the future, we're updating our land use, we can better plan for the future of this area.
Just to be clear, we knew back then that there would be no interchange at this intersection. Staff was well aware of that at that time. And I also have you reference the additional property to the south that is currently owned by NCDOT as to why this site in 2017, but then also now still should yield some type of non-residential. We're not looking at it just on this one site. You look at it like every land use plan. You look at it from the broader vision of not only what should be built today, but what the future of it should look like.
yeah, I think that's fair. But for me, when you look at it, though, there's nothing around it that has any residential for it or non-residential components.
And in a bigger parcel with more connectivity to other neighborhoods, to be able to connect to an area that serves mixed use density, I could definitely see that, especially in this area along Lake Wheeler. The corridor, it lacks commercial, it lacks walkability. So introducing a property like this along the corridor is definitely needed as we venture down and updating the land use plan, but I just don't see it for this one lone property.
My thoughts are that we do have a problem in the town in general right now in holding on to commercially developable land. It's tended to, and we saw that last year. We overrode the land use plan a number of times, and I've always kind of, when are we going to kind of either step back from that or kind of admit that that's our process? Mostly because the promise of the initial land use plan was that we would very rarely have to make land use plan amendments, that we would actually have to, in general, that it was right, and the land use plan amendments would be possibly around the principles of the land use plan. So there's this commercial thing, and I have to agree, I don't see the value of commercial at this property. That's really clear to me. At the time it was put together, of course, we didn't know when it would get developed. We also, I think as a town, we're trying to put these mixed-use possibilities all around the town so that we wouldn't kind of overrun everything with commercial or overrun everything with residential, but really hint that the open parcels should be working more towards our kind of vision for the future at the time, which was all these mixed-use development. Now, whether this was I can, envision this one being created as we need, there were a couple of nodes around here, and then we need some around here, and then 540's coming in here, there's an open parcel, let's put, and that makes sense to me that we would do that. We would kind of put a little thumbtack in that one, say, that might be a good place for, and that's where, and we want to kind of reserve some of these around for doing that. Okay, that said, so commercial, I don't think this, we're being asked, I think, as the planning board to make kind of that decision. In the absence of a land use, a new land use plan, and with the kind of the precedent that we've set as kind of, well, we'll modify it, especially if staff has worked really closely with the developer to develop something that's very good, and we're kind of trading off that land use plan for some additional, development improvements and higher quality development there. That's something that we've been doing. We've set the precedent for that. So the commercial, that's where I stand on the commercial part. The other part that I have concerned about is process.
Right.
Now, when we put in the land use plan, and it bit us, Adeline Place went in. It went in kind of against the land use plan that we had really hoped for that. And if you look at that, that's a very important area around, Academy and Judd Parkway.
Mm-hmm.
That's that would have been great for having some showcase mixed-use development to go up. It would have really done well. However, at the time that development came in, the land use plan wasn't ready, and they had every right to develop it the way that they wanted to based on the previous precedent. When we put in the land use plan, any in-flight projects continued on from there. We ate them. We didn't like it. We would have liked to have done what we're trying to do here. Pump the brakes, stop the development, and wait until we can change the rules on you and move it forward. So I think that the process issue, I feel the fair thing is to say pump the brakes, to say we want to stop this, but it has to be on the new projects coming in the door, not the ones that are just about ready to, that are halfway through the process, getting ready for planning board and town board approval. Those, I think, the horse is out of the barn on those. In all fairness, that's how we be fair and equitable. That's really what I feel is that's how we're fair and equitable in this case is, an in-flight project. Gee, we don't like it. I hope you guys understand why we don't like it, because we put a pin in this. We really wanted some form-based development all around town, and including in this area, which, unfortunately, a lot of this land was taken up, and you can see next door to it, you can see all of that land that's been taken up with huge homes, with large lots, and the definition of sprawl has happened all around this. So where the heck are we going to put commercials so that we can start over time, for our children and our children's children and our children's children's children, so that they can actually have, a place to go in a livable community, because we did reserve some of those spots for more modern, more dense, more compact, more walkable, more usable, form-based, beautiful places for people to live. That's our plan, and it is hard. So we do need to communicate that, and I think the staff does a very good job of communicating what our vision is. I think this was just kind of a little hiccup, and again, I think in terms of fairness of the process, it's sort of like a lot of by right things. By right, you guys are wrong. This is, it's not, the land use does not support this. However, we as the planning board, I think, are kind of obligated to say, okay, we don't really have the guidance at this point of staff for the land use of this. What do we think the land use should be? And I don't see commercial here. So, but I also think that we need to be, kind of cognizant of the in-flight projects. Let's let them move along if we can. And certainly, cajole and do your best to try to get people to move along. And it sounds like, there was an attempt here. But until we get a new land use plan, the old one, and then the process of land use plan amendments, we really have to look at that too and see what we can do there. But, otherwise, until we get that new land use plan adjustment, the planning board now owns making those decisions. We're not land use consultants, but we are the planning board. We represent the public, and we're trying to give the best input we can to the town board. So I think it's important for us to do that. So that's where I am.
I I took this staff's advice and I drove out to this area and I made the mistake of going at 5:15, and that was a nightmare. Like just trying. So I see the places that you can enter here, and I'm not going anywhere near this property during the time when I would have free to go to a commercial use area. I'm not going anywhere near this at that time. So any business that's going in there, if we want it to be eat, or live, work, play kind of situation, is going to be limited to business hours. And that's not sustainable for the neighborhood because they're probably going to have working people there. So I don't see this as mixed use, and I want more mixed use stuff just overall because I think it's a great concept. But I also went over to the closest thing that I think is like this, which is Lakestone, and I've never been to a single one of those businesses over there. I've been to Big Lots and Kohl's, but I've never been to one of those singles. But I've also seen where it works out on Holly Springs on 55 and that Thanks a Latte. I've been to those places. So, but that's also a much bigger area and has much traffic. Still wouldn't go around there at 5:15, but sure. I mean, that's another thing. But for me, this is not usable for even small business owners who I think would go into this small area. It's just not, it does not make sense for, like, just from a business owner standpoint.
Right. I think we're all kind of in the same agreement that the non-residential component of it, at least this board's feeling, is that the non-residential component is not really something for us that is a deal breaker. So I think for us, we have to sit here and decide on the process. And understanding you approve one, and then it becomes in subjectivity, and that's for us as a board. If we take that on, that we have to look at this as a project by project basis, or are we holding until now that we have a timeline for the land use plan amendment that we would like for these projects to, as you say, pump the brakes to halt, fair or not fair, but being equitable to everybody. And I think that's the best. That I think is what we have to decide as a board.
I think we have a land use plan now that is in place, and there's all this speculation about what the new one would be, and we could speculate all we want to, but we don't know. So we go off the one that we currently have, and if we feel like that one is correct, or if we agree with what the current one has, without thinking about whatever could happen in the future. None of us can really read minds. We just have to make the best decision based on the information we currently have. And the information we currently have is this, not what is potentially coming down the line.
Sure. Jim?
Thank you. So I don't know whether it's going to say mixed density residential or mixed use residential once the land use plan is updated. We're not asking for a year here. We're asking until May. And my thing is, and this is what I would say to you all, is that you can make a decision today that could potentially have a negative impact on that area going forward for the next 50 years, or you can wait 3 months. You all get to make that decision, and then the town board gets to make that decision. And so it's look, it is a difficult time. You all spent a lot of time working with staff on this, and I appreciate that. But again, it being a unique situation, we are where we are, and again, we're not asking for a year. We don't have, we're not holding any cards back or anything. We don't know, based on the information that's been presented for this project and other similar projects that have been presented similar to this. Since this transitional period dating back to November, December, that have since, a couple developers who have since spoken to the land use plan consultant. We don't know what the land use plan consultant has been working on. Excuse me, let me back up. We know what they've been working on, but they've been gathering all of the information. They're gathering all the ingredients. Now they're working on the land use plan map, which ultimately is going to have the recipe. And so what that looks like, we don't know as of today. We plan to get that information over the next couple of weeks, then ultimately provide that information to the public.
Right, and I think the thing the board here has to also think about too is to say you go through that process and it still contains the non-residential component, goes through the land use plan amendment process. We adopt that land use plan that says non-residential. Highly doubt we're going to be recommending any land use plan amendments shortly after we've just adopted an amended land use plan. So that's something we have to think about too, because right now as a board we kind of disagree with the land use plan as it exists right now. I mean, at least that's the consensus that I'm getting across the whole entire board here.
Yeah, and
So that's the risk we run too, is we deny it based off of it being in compliance with the land use plan, and then the land use plan gets adopted, and it still shows up with the non-residential component, and then they're still going to get recommended for denial when they come back into us. You know?
And another component I would mention is character and typology is what we're looking for to incorporate in the land use plan update. When you look at even what is being proposed right now, which is all residential, it's embedded within large lot development. If you take a look at the surrounding properties, they're 1 acres, or more. And on this, I think they're planning on doing 55 units on 30 acres, if I remember correctly. So, again, pumping the brakes is what we have recommended to make sure that we have the ability to make a decision that would be long-lasting and in the best interest of the entire public and those folks that are traveling down the corridor and knowing that Lake Wheeler Road will be 4-lane one day and population's only growing and traffic management is only growing as well. So
I hear all those things. I think it's a good plan, though. I mean, I think 50-foot buffers and along the large lots, and then they're clustering the ones in the middle. They're doing everything we've ever asked of other developments in that regard. But I just think as a board, we have to, whatever we vote on, be prepared that somebody like Mr. Adcock will come back up here again, I assure you, and tell us that this planning board case was approved for this, and we have to be willing to either state those reasons why we've done it or set that precedent. So with all that, I mean, I think it's up for somebody to make a motion as to how you feel best suited to proceed with this. Like I said, we just have to be willing to live with whatever that is. Understand that we kind of have this really unfortunate situation where I think we all agree it's a pretty decent plan. It's in a really bad timing place to be a really good plan.
So I guess the ultimate question is, who do we? This is hard. Who do we side? What side do we take?
It's not really a side thing. It's more
Right,
of a
yeah.
precedence and a process. I think we are past the land use part of it. Is more of a process place,
Right.
and what does it do in the future? We don't, like you said, we don't know what the future is going to be. I don't know what the land use plan is going to change to this to be. That would be really helpful. And my fear would be, one, we approve this against staff's recommendation, and then the next one comes in that wants to do a land use plan amendment while we're still going through this process, and now all of a sudden that's something that we're expected to look at too. Or worst case is we deny it, and then this thing goes to a land use plan, and this piece of property still becomes a piece that has a non-residential component to it, and there's still going to do a land use plan amendment, and now we've backed them up months. So the question is,
I will have to say that the planning board exists for a reason. I mean, we're an advisory board of citizens of the community. We're not staff. We're not the developers, and we are really required to judge. Not judging is probably not the right word here, but we are to look at each case as it comes through. Look at its surrounding uses, look at what we know about the community, and make our recommendation to the town board. Just because we approve this one or disapprove this one doesn't tie our hands one bit on every case after this. We as a planning board, and this planning board is different. We've got some new members. We've changed around the organization. We, as the planning board, have every right to, as long as we have, good justifications and have expressed those within our discussions, we don't have to say that we're going to be doing this for every single, case we do. Oh, well, we'll never, ever do a land use plan amendment. I actually thought that when we put in this land use plan, I thought we would never do an amendment. And do you know what? 2 months after we put that in, we had a land use plan amendment come in. Gosh darn it. So I don't want us as a planning board to feel like we're giving up any of our advisory authority because of a decision we make or don't make, or a recommendation we don't make, or we are the ones that are supposed to do it a case at a time. Staff is really their hands are tied, and they're getting a lot of guff because they set a precedent and then stopped it. But we're not staff. We are the planning board. We get to decide each case on its merits, period. And that is not going to stop. When there is a land use plan agreed to, we have the authority to recommend a change to it, even if it was approved 2 months ago or in 2 months. So I just want to make sure that the planning board kind of understands their authority to make these decisions, and that we don't give up any authority in a decision that we make to in a future case.
It's very fair. Town board may feel differently.
They may, and it's up to us to listen to them, because we are trying to make recommendations to them, and staff has been very good about providing us feedback from those meetings, and especially when there's been disagreements, we've gotten a lot of feedback from the town board through staff on what kind of things we should look at and what the town board is looking at that maybe we're looking at differently. This may be a case where it's a learning experience for us. It may be that the town board comes back to us and says, the staff was right all along, or they might not. I don't know, but we are an independent advisory authority, and we get to and we do it a case by case basis, because that's the way the system's designed. That's the way this process is designed.
I think that's fair. So, sound like you were ready to make a motion.
I'll make a motion. I recommend, and make sure, because we don't actually have it written in here, could you validate that the motion is correct, please? Okay. Make a motion to recommend approval of REZ 2021-10, a zoning map amendment to a portion of 8537 Lake Wheeler Road from residential agricultural zoning and to the planned unit development PUD zoning district, and the corresponding land use plan amendment from mixed use neighborhood MUN to mixed density residential MDR, as it is reasonable and in the best interest of the public for the reasons identified by the planning board. That's my motion.
All right, we have a motion on the table. Does anybody want to second it?
Hang on here for
Second.
We have a motion and a second, so I guess we'll come to a vote. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Those opposed?
No.
Nay. But I think we got a motion. Let's take a count. Who said aye? Yeah, let's raise our hands. Let's give Eva a fighting chance. Those that said aye, raise your hands. So, Eva, you got that? Those that opposed? Well, motion carries.
Can I just get clarification? You said the motion had reasons as identified by the planning board. Generally,
He changed for the best of the interest of the public, because you guys recommended denial. He recommended approval. Therefore, it's really the recommendations of the planning board, not the staff. I think he contradicts himself if he says recommended by you guys, but he approved it.
Yeah.
Any issues with him changing that language in that motion?
That's fine. It kind of incorporates the discussion we had about it.
Yes, and if there's a need to be a reference to the discussion, there can be.
Got it. All right. Well, we'll take care of that one. I believe we are done with public hearings. Thank goodness. We'll move on to item 6, the planning staff report. This is just really for our information to look through, and I guess unless anybody has any questions, we'll kind of move on from this. Any questions from the board to staff on this? All right. Well, with that, we'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
So we got 2 motions in 2 seconds. Awesome. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We're adjourned.